For Oasis Audio, I'm Wayne Shepherd, doing my best to sound like a gentleman as I introduce you to my guest, John Bridges, today, the author of How to Be a Gentleman. Mr. Bridges, may I call you John?
I hope you will, Wayne, if I may call you Wayne.
Of course. Is that the proper thing to do, ask permission to address someone by their first name?
Well, what's a nice thing to do, I think, when we're in the media world like this, it's sort of taken for granted that people are going to be on a first-name basis, but it never hurts to ask.
Well, I knew you would know the answer to that, so thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
I'm doing my best. I'm pulling out everything I remember Mom trying to teach me, so.
Well, you're 2 for 2 so far,
Okay.
Wayne. Okay.
Well, this is a fun book, How to Be a Gentleman. Tell me how this book came about. Now, this is not the first edition or the first book you've written, is it?
Well, this actually was the first book in the whole series of books that we have that we call the Gentle Manners series. But this, How to Be a Gentleman, is the book that began the entire series about 15 years ago. The way the book came about is, I guess, people have traditionally thought that I know how to behave myself. I was brought up in rural Alabama in a little town called Slapout, Alabama, Wayne. And I was brought up with older parents who just sort of took it that you were going to behave yourself. And I had a brother, and I don't think we were given much opportunity to misbehave. And somehow, over the course of life, because I've gotten fascinated with how people interact with each other and about some of the details of the etiquette world, but mostly about how that makes the whole world work better, people ask me for advice. And one night, I said, why don't I write some of this down and write it down in a way that men could enjoy it and that it would include the information that men need. Men don't need to know all the details about how to plan the wedding or all of that business, but they do need to know the simple details of life, the things that are going to make them get through life more easily. And so I sat down and started saying what a gentleman does and what a gentleman doesn't do, and before too long I had a book, and that's how it began, that simply.
Now, I don't want to underestimate men, but do you find that men read this book, or is it women who pass it on to their men?
I think both of those are true. I think you find, I'm pretty sure that the buyership, the market for this book is women picking it up, passing it along to their sons, maybe to their boyfriends, maybe to their husbands. But I'm finding more and more young men buy these books and buy How to Be a Gentleman because they understand that they're needing to try to get started in the world, and particularly when you're starting out in the business world, when you're going for job interviews, when you're trying to begin to make your way in the world, young men are beginning to realize that they need that, and that in this world, with there being challenges economy-wise and all of that, people know that the smallest detail may make the difference, and that knowing how to interact with other people really is vital to making your way in the world, and also to enjoying your way in the world, and enjoying the life that you live, and making the world more enjoyable for other people. So I think it's both. I think it's men who end up reading these books no matter what, and I hope using them.
Of course.
They seem to.
We are the beneficiaries of your teaching in this regard. So I've noticed that much of what you explain is basically common courtesy, but it is a lost art in many ways, isn't it?
Well, if it were so common, why would I need to write these books, Wayne?
Good point. Okay.
The idea, people say, oh, well, I knew that. Why would you need to tell anybody that? Well, you need to tell people these things because they don't remember them. And the problem, I think, is we just don't pay enough attention in this world and think about other people. And look behind us when we're going through the door so you don't slam the door in somebody else's face. Remember, to put the toilet seat down, things like that. That's thinking about the next person.
Now you're getting really practical.
things that are truly practical, and I hope this book is practical. I hope it tells you things that you need to know and reminds you of things that you might forget in day-to-day life. Is it a lost art? I think that sort of naturally behaving ourselves and having some of these things in our gene pool, I think some of that has slipped over the years. But it's not an art that you can't bring back. Just because it's lost doesn't mean you can't find it again. So I hope that people are wanting to bring this back. I find that people are concerned about their kids not behaving the way they think they ought to behave, and which my response is frequently, well, then how do you behave in front of them?
It turns it right back, yeah.
So let's think about the role model thing there. But if it's a lost art, I hope that we're digging it up again.
You're helping us rediscover it.
Well, I hope.
Yeah. As you mentioned parents and their kids, I was thinking at that very moment what a great book this would be for parents to be reminded of what these things are that need to be passed on to our children.
Well, an interesting thing that I find is people will tell me that after they've given the book to their boys or their young men, their kids, whatever, that before long, the kids are telling them at the dinner table, that's not what the book says.
Uh-oh.
And so they do pick up on these things. And so I think it does come in handy. Sometimes if the parents figure, maybe they haven't thought of the things that they want their young men to know, that they want their kids to know, and that they maybe don't have that list at hand. And also sometimes reading something in a book and also reading it in a way that you hope is pleasant to read and sort of amusing, sometimes people will take that a little more easily than you will if your parents are telling you, because they may not question it in the book as much as they'll question it from their parents. Because you remember when your parents would say, don't go out the house looking like that, and you'll go, I'm out the door right now, because I don't. You're not going to tell me what to do. But maybe a book can tell you.
Yeah. Well, you must be a keen observer of culture, and I mean, in this culture, civility is not a high priority at times. How do you react when you see things going the wrong direction?
Well, it sometimes. Well, if you are a real gentleman, you do have a certain amount of patience, and you do put up with some things, and you try not to fly off the handle at every opportunity or at every chance. But it can be frustrating, and you really find yourself asking, why are they behaving this way? There's no reason to be behaving this way. And there are things that I will do that maybe some other people wouldn't do. But if someone, for instance, if the flight attendants have said it's time to turn off your all electrical devices, whatever, and the plane is trying to taxi down the runway and somebody's still on the phone, I will reach over and say, excuse me, I believe we're supposed to have our phones turned off.
I wanted to ask you about that because you must be tempted to kind of gently correct people when you see them doing wrong.
Gently and gentlemanly, yes. And I think the language you use when you do things like that is important because when you say, I believe we're supposed to have our phones turned off, that's not the same thing as saying, hey, turn your phone off. I mean, there are different ways to do these things. But I have been known to do really sort of remarkable things because desperate times require desperate measures. But I actually did this. I was sitting in the doctor's office waiting for a friend who was there for a procedure of some sort. So I was waiting in the waiting room. And in this doctor's office, there's a sign on the wall that says, if you want to have cell phone conversation, please step out in the hall. And there was a young woman sitting next to me who was on her cell phone. And she had been on her cell phone for a half hour, just moving from call to call to call. And so I decided, I'm just going to pitch right in on these conversations. And so when she would say, well, I don't know, what do you think? I'd just say, well, I don't know, what do you think? and so I just began participating in the conversation, and she looked at me like I was crazy. But you know what? She got off the phone, and maybe she thought I was crazy, but I struck a blow for righteousness there, and she got off the phone. And maybe she would call the cops or something and have me taken away. But sometimes you really can try to make the world a little better place, but you try to be pleasant about it as much as you can.
Sure, good advice
and
always.
not pick a fight with people, because that's not a nice thing to do either.
Hearing that example many times, I have thought someone was talking to me when they're actually talking into their Bluetooth headset, which I couldn't see.
When the headsets first began appearing, you really had to get it into your brain that these people were not just, psychopathic and going down the hall psychotic, going down the street talking to themselves. And to a certain extent, they still are. And it's a crazy situation that people would think that other people want to be included in their conversations, and to hear them talk that much, and to hear them conducting their business, public or private, professional or private business, in front of other people. And the truth of the matter is, there is no such thing as a quiet cell phone conversation. You're talking loud whenever you're on a cell phone, or whenever you're talking into your headset or Bluetooth, whatever. And so it is intruding on other people, no matter what you think. I can tell you, you can't whisper into a cell phone and expect that you're going to be heard. And it does set you off, and it does mean that somebody is getting in your space and getting into and disrupting your time by conducting their business. When they could at least step over into the corner, they could find a quieter place in which to have these conversations. I think maybe there still is an idea that people are supposed to be impressed that we have this technology, and that I've got this machine, and you're supposed to be impressed that I've got it. When, as time has gone on, everybody's got them now.
Ubiquitous, right.
I'm not that they're ubiquitous, and I'm not impressed that you have this piece of equipment, and I'm not interested in hearing you in the middle of your conversation. I'm not interested in watching you answer and send text messages while I'm trying to have dinner with you.
Technology has opened up a whole new arena of common courtesy and gentlemanly behavior. Cell phones are not the only one, but they certainly are one, and a main source of irritation in public, aren't they?
Oh, well, nowadays, we have ways to misbehave that simply did not exist 15 or 20 years ago. You just didn't have the option to be sitting and texting and being rude to another person. That simply didn't exist. But what we do hope is that even though these advances and conveniences are coming along, that we can remember that there still are basic principles of courtesy, and that we can figure out how not to misbehave just because we have this option to misbehave. You don't have to be rude to other people just because you've got some sort of gizmo in your hand. You don't have to do that. You can think twice, and you can think of others no matter what. It gets to be very sort of self-serving to feel that it's so important that you must conduct this conversation right now, and that it doesn't make any difference whether it's intruding on another person, and that frankly, if you've got your cell phone, or you've got your iPad, or you've got your iPhone, you've got whatever piece of equipment in front of you, you've got it, and therefore you must use it. That because it's there, you have to use it, and that there's no downtime in your life at all anymore. You've got to be talking, you've got to be communicating with somebody else all the time. There were a series of print ads that were circulated a few years ago, in which, in one of the ads, a guy and his girlfriend are dancing, handsome young couple, whatever, and he's got his cell phone, and while they're dancing, he's looking down at the cell phone and texting while they're dancing, and the caption on the photo was, "What are you going to be doing next?" Which I find an incredibly insulting idea for the young woman, is that you're not there with her. You're looking at where you're going to go next, what you're going to do next in your life, rather than being in that moment.
But how many times have you been carrying on a conversation with someone and suddenly their text bell will go off and they start typing to someone else even as they're talking to you?
It happens. It happens at dinner. It happens in restaurants. It can happen anywhere. And at least some people, although somehow I think this may almost be worse, at least some people will turn to you and say, "I'm sorry, but I've got to take this message, or I've got to check this." Mm-hmm. Well, no, they don't have to. At least they don't have to. While I'm sitting there, they can say, "Excuse me," and go somewhere else to check the message. Because once the exchange starts, then the other person's texting back to them, and the loop just gets started, and you're sitting there by yourself, twiddling your thumbs, stirring your soup, sipping your cocktail, whatever, by yourself, and they're having fun with whoever this other person is, and you don't even know who it is, and that's a case where apologizing almost calls more attention to the rudeness of it. But you see it all the time, and that amazing thing you'll see of two people having dinner together, and both of them are texting someone else. Of course, who knows? Maybe they're texting each other.
I don't know.
I don't know. I really do think sometimes this is the only way they know to communicate, and they may, in truth, be texting each other across the table.
Let's hope not.
It could be. I don't know.
Well, this is an increasingly casual society, and, showing manners and being a gentleman isn't running cross purposes with a casual society necessarily. But I'm thinking of, even in church today, people walk in, think nothing of walking in with a cup of coffee in their hand in a worship service.
Well, let me tell you, I usher a lot at church, and I am not averse at all to saying, "May I take care of that cup of coffee for you?"
Is that right?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Well, because the church where I go is a historic site, and we don't want people spilling coffee all over everything. Mm-hmm. And, bottled water is okay, because, once again, this is one of the things that's changed in the world. But no, why do you need a cup of coffee during the church service? Help me with that. I mean, I don't understand why you need a cup of coffee. If you need that to stay awake during the sermon, what's your problem, or what's the problem with the sermon? I don't. No, I'm not averse at all. Once again, you can do it in a nice way. I think saying, "May I help you with that cup of coffee," or "May I take care of that cup of coffee with you, or for you," and say. But any time that you say, instead of saying "don't do that," you can say, "We don't do coffee during the service," or something like that. But yes, you see it, and you see people texting and checking their messages, and although that may be silent, the lights are going off, and it's disturbing to other people, and so. But the idea that there seem to be no limits on it. You see it in concerts. You see it everywhere, and you just want to know, why are you even here if you're not going to be here? If you're going to be somewhere else at the same time. I've been at Broadway shows where people, although of course it says turn off the machines, but people will be sitting there texting during the show, and considering what they paid for the tickets, you really do want to know what's up with this? Are you just simply quoting the play to somebody else? Is that what you're doing so that you can have a record of it somehow? But yeah, we see it all the time, and you see it, with elected officials. You see it with celebrities, and so then you get into the role model problem with people, because people think if they do it, then I get to do it too.
In your book, of course, you comprehensively deal with lots of arenas in life where gentlemanly behavior is important. But do you touch on driving and road rage?
Well, I was going to say road rage. Road rage is actually the result of a failure of etiquette frequently. A person feeling that he or she, that it's so important that they have to get ahead of the other people, and they have to keep switching lanes, and because for some reason it's so much more important that they get where they're going ahead of the one person who's in front of them. And that's the kind of thing that really does get under people's skin. It ticks people off. And that's the kind of thing that, yes, it does. It does add up or encourage things like road rage. But it's amazing the kind of things you'll see. I mean, talking about cars in general, not too long ago, this is another example of the kind of thing I will do, since I'm master of the world in terms of all this stuff. But I was in the parking lot of a grocery store not too long ago. A woman was had finished getting her groceries out of her cart, and there's one of those places where sort of chute where you're supposed to put
the corral,
the carts when you're finished. And so instead of taking her cart over, she just rolled it across the parking lot. And of course, it didn't hit the chute; it hit the car next to it. And so she turned around to me and laughed. I said, "That would be funny if it wasn't my car."
Oh.
Of course, it wasn't my car.
Right, but it made her think.
And of course, she was terrified. And I said, that's not my car. But I said, why couldn't you take that car? Why couldn't you take that cart over there? And of course, I'm sure she thinks, well, who is this guy being hall monitor in the parking lot? But there's nothing wrong with speaking up like that. But what a thoughtless thing for a person to be doing. And that's the kind of thing, if it had been my car, who knows what sort of fight could have ensued there in that parking lot. Not from me, of course, but whoever if it had been someone else's car. And so, yes, you see things going on that are it's just thoughtlessness on people's part. And it's the kind of thing that provides opportunities for people to get ticked at each other and to get off on the wrong foot with each other, and it's sort of picking a fight is what it is, and all of it is just about thinking twice, paying attention, and also realizing that other people have a place in the world just like you do, and that the same thing about pulling in and out of traffic. That's the same thing as trying to go through the 10-item line at the grocery store with a full cart of groceries. But the idea being, well, there was nobody in this line, so I'm just going to go through this because this is the empty line.
Now you've done it. You've gone from preaching to meddling now.
There we go. And the thinking is, clearly I needed to get through here so fast. Well, the person who's coming up with only 5 items, who is usually me, because I go to the grocery store every night, coming up with 5 items, then I'm stuck looking for a line where there isn't somebody with a full basket of groceries, a full cart of groceries. And I have seen, at one of the local grocery stores where I go nightly, the person, the cashier in the 10-item line, I have seen them. They have taken on a policy of saying to the person, "I'm sorry, this is the 10-item line," and I don't see that very much, but I'm seeing it some, and maybe that helps people learn. But that's the kind of thing that somehow that you were so much more important than anybody else. And so you get to go through the wrong line because you're in a hurry.
Yeah, that's what's projected, isn't it? That I'm more important than you are.
I'm more important than you are. And I frequently say, it's okay for you to wait in line behind the person in front of you because that woman may really need to get home with that box of Pampers, you know? There may be some reason that person needs to go faster than you need to go, and that you don't have to barge in. Standing in line is a skill that Americans do not have very well. People in some other countries seem to understand that and to be trained and to have it genetically, the understanding that you stand in line and that, frankly, things move more quickly if you stand in line rather than barging in. But that's a skill we could really learn.
Well, John, let me switch gears. You talk about much more in the book, of course, and for those who have yet to listen to How to Be a Gentleman, you're going to hear a lot more advice and good advice from John Bridges here. But, John, let me ask you about language and our conversations with each other. Just give us a couple of ideas here of how we should be conducting ourselves.
Well, for one thing, listening is terribly important because we don't listen a lot to what the other person is saying, and we don't understand how to engage them in conversation by asking them questions about themselves or whatever. A weakness that we have, I fear, is people don't know how to make an introduction anymore. People don't know how to introduce themselves. They forget to introduce themselves. There's a lot of yep and nope and and stuff that goes on out there when yes and no are perhaps more appropriate responses in every situation. Forgetting to say please and thank you, that having kind of gone out of our lives, and learning to say you're welcome after somebody says thank you, little details like that, because those things show respect for the other person, and they show that you're paying attention. And, of course, all sorts of language slips into our lives. You know, you'll hear sort of trite words that slip in to our conversation, and all of a sudden everybody's using it, and it begins to drive other people crazy because when you start doing it too, and trying to think about what you're really saying, and to think ahead when you're talking, and trying to listen to other people, and trying to have a real conversation rather than just talking all the time as if what you have to say, once again, is the most important thing in the world. That's a point at in which conversation becomes a real sort of match of the manner world there, and where it does become a point of etiquette. And that takes thinking, and that, frankly, takes practice. Because some people really are shy. Some people can't think of anything to say. So coming up with the simplest things you can say, what do you think about the weather today? Talking about the weather is better than talking about nothing. So, yes, but that takes practice, and that takes consideration of other people, too. I keep going back to that, but it really is about consideration of other people.
John, I understand that you often have the chance to talk to college-age kids. How do they respond when you present what you do to them?
Well, I think many times they're sort of stymied and bemused if you try to get on too high-minded a level about the sort of morality of manners or whatever, and trying to have them explain how the world is a better place if people behave better. But what's interesting to me, I like them to ask questions so I can know what they really want to know. About a year ago, I was doing a speaking engagement at a university up north, and talking to the fraternity boys, and who you would think would be the ones who, for the most part, some of them at least, ought to know better. And at the end of the session, 5 of these guys, 5 of them, Wayne, came up to me and wanted me to show them how to shake hands. They did not know how to shake hands. And it was something as simple as that. And so sometimes you don't really know what it is that people want to know, and that's why when we talk about this being common courtesy, it may not be all that common to some people.
I can't reach through the telephone and shake your hand, but can you just tell me what makes for a good handshake?
Well, the first place is knowing who gets to stick out his hand first. You always, if you're the younger person, you wait for the older person to initiate the handshake, and or if the person is, shall we say, more prestigious, for instance, if I'm meeting a member of Congress or I'm meeting the president or somebody like that, I would wait for them to extend their hand before I would shake hands with them. And always, a gentleman always waits for a lady to extend her hand before shaking her hand. But, you take the hand, putting your thumb and your fingers around that person's palm, and you give it a sort of gentle little shake. You don't pump it up and down,
No.
and then let it go, and say pleased to meet you or good to see you or whatever seems, or hi, how are you doing? Whatever seems appropriate at that time. But it's as simple as that. But the thing of knowing who gets to initiate the handshake. And if you are in the position of, shall we say, power, if you're the older person or if you're the elected official or whoever, then it's incumbent upon you to be kind enough to extend your hand so the other person isn't left there twiddling his thumbs. So that's how that works.
Well, we are all better off to have your book in hand. The audio edition is available now from Oasis as well, How to Be a Gentleman. It's been revised and expanded, a contemporary guide to common courtesy by John Bridges. John, you have a website. Can you give that for those who may not have looked at it just yet?
It's www.johnbridges.com. It's
all right.
Simple as that.
Good. johnbridges.com. How to Be a Gentleman. John, thanks for your time today.
Well, thank you, Wayne. This has been fun.
For Oasis Audio, I'm Wayne Shepherd.